And this next topic, I have to say, for this next panel is one very near and dear to my heart. So if you want to take your seats, we're going to get rolling in just a moment. So I'll tell you a little story. When I first moved to London in 2013, it was to take care of our webcasting business. And the first thing that struck me when I moved out there was just how different our business was in EMEA than it was in North America. And it's not that we had different talent. We have amazing talent in both regions. And we actually have an identical percentage of investor relations between the two regions. But the way we did investor relations events in Europe was so different than how we did them in North America. I'm talking about video, slides, full production, people on site. These weren't just earnings presentations, these were events. And this is a tactic that Europe has not just adopted recently. This is how they've been doing it for a very long time. Nothing about earnings presentations in EMEA is about just ticking a box and meeting a regulatory requirement. Companies there really see it as an opportunity to get in front of their investors, in front of the analyst community, and show themselves, show who they are as a company. And so for this next session, we're going to dive into this tried and true European tactic and talk a little bit about why it's now just coming to the forefront in IR communications here in North America. We're going to talk about why video is so powerful, why it can get you in front of your investors, and why it's important to consider it. And we'll also ask our panelists to provide you some tools and some tactics to make sure that your video earnings can be a resounding success. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. We have Bryan, Managing Director at Lumi Global, Mark Loehr, CEO of OpenExchange, and our own Simon Ball, AVP of Product Management here at West. They're here to discuss video for investor relations. Gentlemen, take it away.
We got two Simons.
That's going to be tough.
That's pretty amazing. And Simon Ball has been recently promoted to Senior Vice President Simon Ball,
Thank
not
you.
AVP Simon Ball.
Well spotted. I didn't catch that.
Will there be,
Thank you.
Will there be any living with you going forward?
No. My head's going to grow very big.
Great. As you notice, Simon's picture's not in there because he just decided now that he's an SVP, I want to be on the panel.
Well, actually, it's a subject so dear to my heart. I've got to be on that panel. Let me on. And so I gate crashed.
Great. So I just want to start. This is a thing that's always baffled me, right, in the space. I wrote an article about 2.5, 3 years ago is why isn't video part of every earnings call? And we mentioned on the last panel, just like having a good quarter, look at me, I'm amazing. Not having a good quarter, look at me, trust me. So it blows me away why more investor-related programs, whether it's an AGM, whether it's IR, whether it's earnings, or whether it's anything like your organization does, Mark, why video isn't more. I know you're focused at it, but why still today does every single, well, not every single one, I mean, T-Mobile, I think, does it better than anyone in the entire world. He's been doing it for years. He streams, John Loehr, their CEO, streams into Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for the company and his personal. He's been doing it ever since he became CEO of the organization, and not because he's doing video, but look at his stock. It's gone from, like, when he took over CEO, $18, and now it's like, whatever, 60s. I don't know what it is today. But it's amazing, and he is as much the company as the company is. And I think it's a huge opportunity for executives to really get out there, and it goes back to becoming opinion leaders. But in long-winded, Simon, why do you think that earnings still seems like, it's just, unless I'm an analyst, it's a snooze. It's so boring.
Yeah. Well, which Simon do you want?
Simon Bryan first.
Simon Bryan, I think.
You're a last-minute guess. You're just like eye candy. You're just.
Yeah, I'll just sit here and look pretty.
No, I think I think a lot of it is risk averse. You know, I do wonder. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do wonder if there's, you know, particularly with an earnings call, for example, there's just, you know, whatever you do, don't put a foot wrong. We don't want to scare the markets and so on. And I do wonder whether there's just been a very sort of conservatism with earnings calls, for example. And you know, and I think that that's probably the wrong way to look at it in terms of you know, in terms of getting a message out and so on. Earnings calls, for example, invariably you have a captive audience.
Yep.
You know, people do want to stay on to see if there's any snippets they might get from an investment perspective. So with that captive audience, why not make more of it?
Right. And also think on the media side. Am I more likely to, if I'm CNBC or Bloomberg, grab a soundbite or a piece of video when the CEO says something and then that's how things go viral. It's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a compliance tick box in the US as well, right? So they want to make it as easy as possible to communicate and adhere to that regulatory compliance thing. And it tends to be, you've got a very dispersed analyst audience. So you have 5 guys sitting around a spider phone doing the conference call. It's just an easy sort of habit that people have got into. Making that into video is sort of perceived as challenging, but it's totally untrue. You can create a video event out of it and actually show the personality, read the body language, get a feeling of trust and connection.
It's a panel event.
Exactly.
That's really what it is. It is mind-boggling to me. Like, so obviously we acquired from NASDAQ, so you were part of NASDAQ for a long time, and before that, Thomson Reuters, right? So why, even in those organizations where you were this close to the listed company, was there a lot of people asking and pushing back, or was there just, it works the way it is, we're not going to do it?
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of habit. In Europe, they tend to do more video because it's less of a regulatory driver, and they present to an analyst audience that they bring into a room. So it's actually a very small step to create video from it. Because of the habit in the US, where it's typically a conference call, you've not invited your analyst audience into the room, it's a bigger step to make that sort of leap of, I'm going to present my results to an audience as opposed to sit around a spider phone and shuffle my phones. But that really has to change. You said
this is the industry of disruption. One company that's doing disruption is Mark, your company, OpenExchange. I mean, you started as video. So every single piece of financial information that you've delivered since you started a company, what year?
2012.
2012 has been video, right?
Right.
I mean, video conferencing, video. Why is there such an openness there, but why isn't that moving to the public?
Well, let me kind of take the first question and kind of build back into it.
Would love if you did.
I was CEO of a public company back in the 2000s, and I remember all those earnings calls. One of the things that was very important was to kind of have the CFO there, IR, legal, kind of all in the same room, so that as we were asked those questions, we could make that quick look, and should I say that, or you answer that one, or don't say that kind of a thing. So that body language is still prevalent, I think, sort of the disclosure and comfort with it. And I also think it's complicated because so many of the investors for U.S. companies are in the U.S. I'm going to see most of them in New York and Boston in the next 2 weeks. In Europe, it's only really 45%. The rest are kind of global, so using video to get that out there the same day is much more important. So I think there's a couple different things. I also think that people weren't as comfortable with video overall in the U.S., and we're breaking that mold for them. We're getting them comfortable because we're doing thousands of meetings every month by video of CEOs meeting with investors, a group conference, fireside chats constantly throughout the day. And I think that as they get more comfortable with video, they're going to say, why aren't we doing this for earnings?
Well, I'm going to ask you a question. So if I'm doing it right now to investors, so I'm doing OpenExchange and I'm talking to an investor, investor's going, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to invest $100 million or whatever into this organization. It's just natural going, are they more successful in raising money since they added video than before? Because I'm going to make the guess that the video, because it's an added expense, obviously is paying off.
Well, actually, video is saving the money because they don't have to travel as much, right?
Right.
And it's really the immediacy. That you can actually see most of their big clients within 2 days of the earnings as opposed to 2 months, that type of a cycle. So there's an appreciation of that. So we're getting lots of kudos from the CEO. Thank you that I didn't have to kind of go on the road, save me time so I can actually do my job. We're seeing that kind of happen.
But I also still get to see the CEO, not just hear a voice.
Correct.
Fumbling papers, I get to look you in the eyes again and know what you're thinking. On Lumi's side, though, I mean, a lot of your stuff is shareholder, right? That's like one of the secret sauces that Lumi has. Why has shareholder events taken off and earnings hasn't? Even in the U.S., Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett was probably the first one who streamed his shareholders. So why do you think it's taken off so much more on your shareholder side?
Yeah, I mean, I think the annual meeting is valued by investors and issuers, right? It's an important part of the year.
Well, it's all the stockholders, right?
It's the one time where the stockholders, as you say, get to look in the whites of the eyes of the board. I think Berkshire Hathaway's the great example, I mean, they bring in journalists and have fireside chats like this with journalists asking questions. I think it's Walmart still get 20,000 people into a basketball arena. But I think there's challenges, in particular in the US, with accessibility. If you want to be more accessible, if you want to be more transparent, and there's a demand for that, then a sort of virtual meeting, a hybrid meeting is the way to do that. And of course, based on some of the things we've talked about already, and particularly from the first panel, video is probably the most engaging way in which we can do those annual meetings. I mean, to Nicole's point about Europe, we're involved in a lot of these European annual meetings. We were at Total Oil earlier this year. They've got 4,000 people in attendance. They've got Greenpeace abseiling in. It's quite the show. But they're always videoed, because I think, particularly in Europe, I think that maybe slightly advanced in sort of shareholder engagement in terms of some of the corporate social responsibility and ESG and environmental social governance. I think there's a desire, whether regulatory or whether the regulations have come out of this desire, for there to be greater engagement. And video and accessibility is the way to do that.
Right. I mean, last time I was in Paris with you, Simon, we went to an event that Victoire was running in Paris. It was an AGM, and they were streaming it, a 5-camera shoot. I mean, they made a big production out of it.
Yeah, it's recreating the experience that the audience has online as well to broaden your message.
Right.
It's a natural extension.
And using technologies like Lumi, now you're letting people vote remotely too.
Yep.
Again, you really want to be able to see everyone if I'm going to be voting, right? So,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that one of the sort of criticisms of a fully virtual approach to an annual meeting is, can we recreate the in-room dynamic? And I think, obviously, the only way you can really do that is with video.
right. Let's get you a microphone so the world on the web can hear it. Microphone person. There's one over there. It's coming. It's just anyone who's ever watched anything on the web before, all of a sudden when a question goes and you hear nothing and then you hear an answer, it stinks. So it's...
So given the fact that earnings are a lot of numbers, how does that come across in video? Like, how do you make that come alive in video?
That's a great question. So you obviously display the numbers as well. Right? So you have, with today's technology and the recent acquisition of Inexpo, you can actually do picture-in-picture. So you can have the numbers on a slide and the picture of the person speaking it as well. So they do go hand in hand. It's an interactive experience. One that's become so much more ubiquitous nowadays as well. People expect it. You expect to have a visual experience that is live, that is video, is with graphics. You expect to, you should be emulating more of a news feeling than a radio broadcast feeling.
Well, Mark, let me ask you, because, every day, it's not so much for earnings, but you're doing investor calls. How does the graphics come in, and how does it still play well?
Graphics like presentations, or
The
just
presentations and financial numbers, and because I'm going to assume, besides the CEO on the other side talking about why my company is a great invest, they're also talking the same numbers that we were doing on earnings.
They get through numbers pretty quickly, and they try to show pretty big, so big font, but people really are not looking for the numbers. They're going to be able to read those kind of as they're kind of watching. They're really looking for the body language, and they're really waiting for Q&A. I've seen video used a couple different ways. We actually did one for Anglo American in London, where NASDAQ was the team there on site, but it was that Citi was hosting it. And so Citi brought in 3 other locations around the world using OpenExchange, so they had the chief scientist participate as well. So that was a nice way to kind of use it. But really, everybody's waiting for the Q&A. And they're waiting for that tough question to see kind of the body language, to see whether or not this product is really rolling out the way it's going to be, or whether that lawsuit's really going to pan out the way people fear it's going to.
Well, and here's like one of the things that I learned, because I didn't know this before the acquisition, that it's legal, and Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, it's legal in the US, if I'm doing an IR call, to pre-record the IR portion of it, right, the quarterly report, but you have to have a live Q&A. So I could even make the argument, make the video the recorded, pre-recorded, put it in your press release so people, when they get the press release with all the financial information, they could watch it in advance, just make the Q&A portion truly live, so everyone now can digest everything and ask the questions. If you're worried about the hey, what do we say to this? What do we say to this? You're not being shown your video for the Q&A if you're that much of a coward.
Provided that video is made available to everybody at the same time on the day of your earnings after you've done.
But it's legal, right? I can record it 5 days before, right?
You can, but you can't show it to an individual audience. When you transmit it, it's live and it's live to everybody. But yeah, you can record. We do a lot of audio recordings because people want to pre-do their presentation in audio.
So it goes to audio record, but it to live audio?
And then to a live Q&A. It's absolutely perfect to do that in video. I mean, why would you not? If you're going to sit and do an audio recording, why not sit and do a video recording and then go to a live Q&A, which would be, it could actually be audio and still, adhere to that sort of habit of I want to sit in my boardroom with my C-suite and answer questions coming in.
Because I would think if we were publicly traded, or if they spun us up and they made us publicly traded, well, one, I'd want to do it live, but if I wasn't going to do live, I want to get that video out there. So at 8:30 in the morning when we did the announcement that it was out there, I want to have all the analysts a chance to digest it. So when they come to me, they're not thinking of just questions off the top or what they just read. We're engaging.
Yeah, a video press release with a piece of content that then switches to the live when the live event happens.
Brian?
Yeah, and I think one thing is, particularly with the analyst calls or the earnings calls, is to not just look at it as an IR event, right?
Right.
It's a PR event, it's a marketing event as well. You spend goodness knows how much time calling analysts, leaving voicemails, etc. And here's an opportunity to get your message out effectively. There's so much noise around. Here's the one opportunity where you do have that captive audience. Right. You do have that opportunity to get your message out there. So yeah, I mean, I would say. Don't look upon it just as an IR event.
No. And then it goes, how likely, like I said in the last panel, how likely is a Bloomberg or CNBC or an Associated Press or someone to grab a piece of video and play that back that they grab from a shareholders or an earnings, as opposed to just popping a logo up and saying something. That makes it actually more compelling.
Exactly. I mean, you've never seen an audio-only gender reveal on YouTube, so I think there's a lot to be said for the engagement piece of the video.
But why not have questions coming in via video as well? And with networks that...
Well, this is what OpenExchange does. Isn't it about that? It's not only that I get to see the CEO. CEO wants to see the guy asking the question, right?
They do. And the research analyst also wants to be on the screen, asking that smart question or asking that tough question.
Yeah.
So I think, Ben, this is all coming. What I see every single day, Citi does 110,000 meetings, events for companies with investors every single year. And we handled 500 meetings for them last year, and they think that's a lot. 500 out of 100,000, right? This year we're going to do 1,000 meetings for them video. We're planning on 10,000. So we think it's going to be 50-50 in a couple of years out. With capital markets transactions, to kind of not just the IPO but the follow-on. We're engaged right now for a company to do a video at 3:30. They're going to announce at 4 o'clock. They're going to do $1 billion follow-on offering, and we're going to do it with a 5-minute recording. Then we'll play that at 4:30, and then we'll go right into Q&A. So that same kind of video Q&A type of a thing. And it shows you that people's minds are opening up to this is a resource, we should be using it. And I also think the complexity of putting these things on has gone down a lot. Yeah. It's just, it used to be so painful. How much work do I have to do? How do I have to negotiate? Now it's like, okay, same team, same crew, let's go. And we're kind of up and at it. And we're seeing that sort of. And now they also have a choice of I can have the really high-end one or this one down here or really the more authentic one that just happens in 5 minutes. And that opens up opportunities for
And one of the secret sauces that OpenExchange has done is like, when you talk about the low level, you've basically networked every single VCU, video conference room, that all these guys have. So theoretically, a CEO or an executive has to walk down the hall, go in a room, sit down, and he's doing a broadcast. Or he can go walk down the hall and go into a studio, or go into a conference room where we bring a 3-camera shoot in. Or they can go to a hotel and do it. You've basically given them like a soup to nuts approach, but there's no barrier of entry anymore.
Yeah.
And here's the question I was thinking when you were saying this. How important what you're doing is the archive?
You asked 5 questions in there.
I know, but to me, get used to me. This is how it goes.
30,000.
It's called ADD, and I'm already thinking somewhere else. So,
first of all, we've got 30,000 different endpoints that are cataloged.
Right.
And so, whether it's the Federal Reserve or Citi or Goldman Sachs or Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority, they're all kind of in there, so we can kind of connect them very quickly. Early on, when we created this network, it was really much point-to-point. CEO talking to an investor. But then if they said, wait a minute, let's get the CEO of J&J, and let's get 10 investors on there. So we got Fidelity and Capital and T. Rowe, et cetera. And then study came back and said, well, maybe we should do that to 200 and have a simultaneous webcast. Oh, maybe I should record that.
Right.
Play it back, take this snippet. So UBS is now contracted on November 13th and 14th. We're going to do 80 fireside chats around the world in 2 days, analysts moderating with it, and we're recording all those. We're going to put it into a destination video showcase.
And then what I want to do is what Kathy and Emma were saying, we were talking before, or what Drew's whole thing is about the snackable content. I want to be able to just see the 30-second overview of that and then decide, do I want to sit through that hour-and-a-half presentation?
How about transcripts? So we're putting
Right.
transcripts underneath all of them with a keyword so you can search it. So you don't even know which one you want to go to, but you say that's the one that's most relevant, and I see it already had 3,000 views.
Yeah.
So it's all coming for IR and companies to think about how to use video, and we're seeing it come every day.
And even in the standard format where you've had a queue of questionnaires on an audio interface that says, I want to pick these people question, we've been experimenting. You could do that with video. So the CEO can control who's going to be asking the question, pull them in as a video, a piece of content, and display it as
We
part
put
of
it
the
in
other thing.
picture-in-picture.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we had Ambev do one of these things, and they had 10, people on by video, and we knew who it was going to be. So they'd come in underneath it, and CEO could say, hey, Mary, it's good to see you, and then she'd go full screen.
I love all the name dropping you're doing, Mark. I like this. We're getting like real experience. So on the Lumi side, how important is production value? So we talked about it a little bit before, and we said in some cases, I like just someone on their iPhone. Obviously, I do not want to watch an earnings video produced from someone's iPhone.
Yeah.
That would be really bad for the organization, and really bad for me watching. But
Yeah.
are they asking you more and more? Did it go from a single camera, multi-camera to?
I think certainly on the annual shareholder meeting side, I mean, globally they are just they're shows, right? They're big events. The brand is front and center. You need to look the part. And I think as we get to other IR-related matters such as the earnings call, I mean, I think production value is going to become increasingly important. To Mark's point, in that video is coming and coming fast. This is your brand out there. You want to put your best foot forward, and doing that in a professional way is the way to do it. I mean, you also want to do it in an authentic way as well, of course, because you want people to sort of digest and believe what you're saying. So I think there's a balance to be had, sort of between slick production but also being authentic.
Yeah, we want real.
Yeah.
I want real. I mean, that's what basically it's real, right? I'm sitting there talking to investors.
I'll give you 2 quick stories. Right now, as we speak, there's one uptown, they're tearing apart the Tesla, right? And so the production value in that room is excellent, and who's seeing it's very live. But one of the persons coming in from Toronto, and they're actually on an iPhone. But he's the expert on the battery from China, and they wanted his opinion, and they didn't want it by audio. They wanted it kind of live. So that's happening.
See, that's in a case where I don't care if he's, I don't care if it's 56K and the video is this big. I just want that guy's opinion in, right? So.
And we tried one last week with doctors that just came out of surgery, and they were talking about kind of what medical devices they were using, how that changed from last year. And we actually had one doctor who was in his office, and he showed us how he was doing a robotic surgery from his computer. It was on a cadaver, it wasn't a live person.
And I saw a good example. I sort of had a look at the other day. Sort of had a look on YouTube at some of the differences between organisations, earnings calls, and so on. And one that stood out to me was Alphabet's.
Right.
So that if you look on YouTube, their annual meeting's there, and it's great. Multiple camera angles, high definition, and so on. And then there's also their earnings calls on there. And I mean, it's awful. It was, first of all, there was no video, there were just slides. It wasn't particularly high in definition. I mean, if it wasn't Alphabet, you'd think, would they get away with this, right? But,
Right, and you would think that it's almost more important than, their shareholder, the earnings.
Mm.
Because, I mean, I wonder if there was a study done, if someone did an earnings with video and they did just a typical audio one, did the stock move more the next day? Whether up or down, that would tell a lot how bad that CEO presented on video or good, or how bad the company is doing or good. But I wonder if there is a difference. It goes back to the first question. Since the organizations like Citi started adding video instead of making them audio calls, have investments gone up? Have they closed more deals? Is it allow them to do, like you said, besides traveling, does it allow them to do more?
Cities' revenues have gone up a lot. They're doing events they never even thought possible before. These hospital events, they'll have 6 hours of it. People are staying on for 4.5 hours, 100 people watching that. If something's live, you can't turn away from it.
I know.
And so they're realizing that, and they've got 100,000 meetings going on every single day. How do we get it out there?
It's like everyone watching us right now.
To come back
Can't turn away.
to the early things you talked about before, I think to give you guys credit for kind of putting, NASDAQ and Expo, et cetera, all this together, you're connecting the dots. You're connecting the dots at a really early stage where video is going to kind of affect all businesses, not just financial services.
Yep.
And I think really what you're doing here is not just connecting the dots, putting these things together, you're actually connecting past, present, and future, because there's so much ahead of us about where we're going. That's why this day is so exciting.
Thank you. The event's over. You said everything I need to say. Thank you. Good night. Wow, I lost my train of thought because I like that answer so much. I wish I could be writing that down. Right, anything you want to add? I mean, so here's the question. First, if you guys have any questions, ask questions. But where do you think everyone should start, Bryan? Anyone out there who's representing an organization and it's IR, what's the first thing they should do? What should they do to get started?
I mean, I think to my point earlier, don't look upon this purely as an IR event. Here's an opportunity to get a message out. You've got that audience there. Interspersing, if you've got a complex subject matter, whatever it might be, interspersing video within that, and really using it as a PR tool. And if it's video, it's probably more engaging. It's certainly more shareable. And perhaps not just look at it as a regulatory step you have to go through. It's something you can really use to market your business.
Simon, I could actually ask you this one. So we do more IR streaming than any other company in the entire world. But is it fair to say less than 5% is video IR?
Less than 5%. Investor days tend to be more video orientated, but earnings is a very small percentage.
So if I was going to send you on the road for the next 365 days to go see every single of those clients, so get ready, pack your bag. What's the first thing you would, how would you try to persuade me? What would you tell me if I was one of these customers to try video?
It positions your company as forward-thinking and as modern and embracing today's technology, not yesterday's technology. You want to be associated with what is new and exciting and familiar to your audience, not what is old and stale. It's about positioning yourself as being an innovator. I mean, T-Mobile is a great example,
Yep.
right? They put it on their Facebook Live page. He's a very sort of animated presenter anyway, and it looks good, and yeah, so that's what I would say.
But even when you say innovators, some of the oldest companies in the world have done it. Oldest companies, like GM was I think the first company that ever did an IR stream, and it was after a really bad quarter, and the CEO at the time basically said the reason she did it was she wanted to look in the audience of every investor and every analyst and say, I got this under control and I'm going to fix this. And so you would think new companies, anyone who's getting listed now, why would you not do it?
Exactly.
Right? You're using this technology every day. You're doing webcast marketing, you're popping videos, you're becoming an opinion leader, you're going on events like this, you're doing events like this. But the one thing that drives your business, you're not using the technology that you preach every single day?
Yeah. People invest in people. People trust people. And the best way of showing that is to see the person that is talking to you.
Mark, how would you tell someone this to try?
Do your first one internal. London Stock Exchange did a live event 2 weeks. It's a big event. Head of MI5 is speaking. They're not quite ready to go prime time and show it to the full world, but we're going to live stream it internally inside of all employees so that the London Stock Exchange can watch it. So if you're getting people that are getting closer to try to do a live video IR presentation, first one can be internal, so people can watch it, check it, make sure it's good, get the bugs out, so the next one goes live. And maybe as you get right up to that day and you've already done a couple testing and people say, this really works, I really love it, screw it, let's go live now. I've done that a couple times.
What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the one gotcha would you give the audience? Just be prepared. Here's the one downside.
The video goes out, right?
Right. Unless you're a streaming company doing it, you're really not. I mean, if the video goes out, it's kind of late. And that's when they call us and yell at us.
Yeah.
But it never goes out on ours, right?
Never.
Okay. Outside of the shuffling of the papers, what's your biggest gotcha?
I mean, I've got some. I could tell you lots of stories about annual meetings.
Give
with,
us one.
Okay, well, I mean, there was.
No one's going to share.
I mean, so invariably they're involved with, for whatever reason, oil companies. Surprise, surprise. But as I say, we were at Total and we had, these Greenpeace were in the rafters of the venue and they came abseiling in. And at one point they were thinking of adjourning the meeting and holding it again the following week. And of course, my CEO was rubbing his hands. He thought double the money. But anyway, that didn't quite happen. I've also been at BP where people chain themselves to their seats. But perhaps the funniest one I've seen was it was actually in Belgium, and they provided lunch for all the shareholders, and everyone had a baguette. And they obviously didn't like what the board was saying, and after one of the questions, there was a hail of baguettes flying across the room at the board. And so that probably made for an engaging video experience.
You have any?
I can't top that.
Is that video on archive?
I'm sure it must be somewhere. Yeah.
We had a doctor come on screen last week. He was down in the Bahamas and he didn't have a shirt on.
No, but was he worthy of not wearing a shirt?
I didn't see it.
It is the Bahamas.
Well, it's hard to follow. It's hard to follow that sort of engaging video moments. In Europe, they tend to do a lot more video, right? And so then they tend to be much more. It's easy to put a couple of cameras in the back of the room. They're already doing a presentation, and so there's been some bloopers. You could have a earnings blooper, the chap that unfortunately tripped as he went up to the
But that's
podium.
life.
It's life.
It makes you more endearing. As long as you don't mess up the numbers, you don't you don't give wrong numbers, right? And you're open and you're honest and you do everything. You check the boxes, what you have to do legally. I think it makes you more human.
It does, and the analyst audience, they all laughed. He made a joke of it, and it was a great entry to the presentation. It felt human, and you got that human feeling.
If that leads that CEO to get interviewed on Bloomberg or a CNBC show, even if it's talking about how to feel to make the mistake, it's unless you're having the worst quarter ever, you wouldn't want to. But if not, it makes that CEO more, or an executive more, an opinion leader in this space.
Exactly.
All right, any questions? We have a question.
So I understand that this is a nice way to kind of supplement the traditional release of earnings in a more digestible format. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on consistency's sake, and maybe if you wouldn't want to have a video of net outflows, for example. Like, do you think that it needs to be a recurring thing, or is there any downside to really releasing a short video, kind of pushed further leveraging, a really poor quarter?
So I think getting your message out, there's no reason why you shouldn't have. In fact, you should positively encourage having a short address from the CEO. So in shareholder meetings, for example, you have the chairman's letter. That should be video. In earnings, you're going to have a foreword from the CEO. No reason why that shouldn't be video. No reason why that shouldn't go out in the morning with the press release to say we're doing this later. And just to sort of embrace, today's environment. People are expecting it, and it feels like that companies are lagging behind if they're not embracing that.
Listen, if you're not going to pre-record your earnings and you're going to do you have to do the press release anyway. Jeff Stacy and I have had this conversation. Why wouldn't you do sort of the movie trailer anyway? CEO address or an executive address going, hey, on this earnings, we're going to discuss this. Not giving anything away before that you can't legally give away, but the little trailer for it. Or afterwards, why can't you have someone on the exec team give sort of a recap of what we covered? Again, as long as you follow the guidelines and you're legally right. That's what it's about. You pick going to a movie a lot of times because you watch a movie trailer. Give me a little snackable content. I mean, so one of the things I think OpenExchange is doing, you're doing little from the floor or analysts, what are you actually calling them? I don't want to say it wrong.
No, they're 2-minute videos, they're research recaps. So basically, a couple of our firms, it's that little studio right off the trading floor. People will walk in and they'll give their morning update. I just upgraded IBM to a buy. These are the reasons why. I think their artificial intelligence thing is really great. And it's really top of mind. They just did it in front of the sales force. They go off to this little green screen room and then it's auto-record back to our studio. We get a little alert that it's on its way in. We cut the beginning, cut the end, throw the disclaimer on, and then we do an AI transcription that goes back to compliance while we're tidying it up. And if compliance likes it, they just hit click and it's published and it goes inside the research node into a video library.
It's a great way from the start.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for having, sort of as well as a sort of statutory numbers piece that might be a little bit dry, is interspersing video. I think Microsoft did this on an earnings call where when Nadella became CEO, they had a nice clip of him walking around the Microsoft campus, chatting with an interviewer. That was part of it. In my neck of the woods up in Minneapolis, we've got Medtronic. They acquired Covidian, Irish company, and they had snippets of Covidian people in Ireland sort of introducing themselves, introducing what they do, and that was all part of the earnings call mixed in with the some of the required pieces.
I think all annual reports should have video elements on the pages, right? They should become interactive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so if I was going to be on this panel with you guys in 5 years from now, how do you think the landscape has changed? Your crystal ball. Mark, first?
Huge uptake, huge uptake. I think that, one, the ease of use, the fact that other firms are doing it or your competitors are doing it and you're not. Everybody's going to be using video, and I'd be surprised if people aren't using video. I think the other thing that be prepared for is transcription. The value that's underneath all these videos is so important. There's going to be so much video out there. People are not going to know which one to go to. And so they're going to have to do a couple of searches here to figure out that's the most relevant one and be able to go to that part of the video. So that's going to change.
Right. We've talked about it. Interactive transcripts is the key, right? So you do a search on Google, you find a little portion of the video, you can watch the little portion of the video instantly from the transcript. You just type in the words. And then if you want to watch the whole video, you can watch the whole video.
Yeah.
A company I'm working with called Trint, they basically have that, and you can go watch that video, and they've got the transcription underneath it. I can grab that 2 sentences, pull it out as a short 5-second video, embed it in a note.
Well, we do it on earnings calls today. When you've got a transcript, it syncs to the video, it syncs to the audio, but it should be syncing to the video because it's so much more compelling.
Then I can pull a little piece out. Bryan?
Yeah, no, I think, well, first of all, I think there's an inevitability about this, but I also think it's not just perhaps the technology and the sort of creativity and using modern technology and so on that's driving this. I think there's some macro things at play as well in terms of, I touched on about the environmental social governance piece, is that issuers are demanding increased engagement. They're asking their transfer agents for greater engagement, their advisors for greater engagement, whether that's e-communications, electronic proxy, and so on. And I think that video is just an extension of that. It's just another way of meeting some of the engagement demands that investors want.
What percentage of your shareholder events that you do are not video? Now,
I would say so that the concept of a virtual meeting is a newer one.
right?
A lot of the annual shareholder meetings tend to be hybrid. The hybrid ones, the larger meetings, always tend to be video. The smaller issuers, where they're just sort of ticking a box from a regulatory perspective, they tend to be audio. But that's sort of to the point of looking at, should we be looking at an analyst call or a shareholder meeting in a certain way? People that look at it as a box checker tend to be audio. Those that look upon it as more of a tool for greater engagement will perhaps be more inclined to use video.
5 years from now, all of our, earning streams, what percentage do you think will be video?
It's a hard number to pin down. I would hope a lot more.
Look in your crystal ball.
The crystal ball, I would like to see 50, 60%, but I think the inflection point is also allowing analysts themselves to queue in video and ask the question in video. Once you get that, you're going to drive corporations to have to embrace it too, because the whole experience is video. But I also think in 5 years from now, you'll start to get profiles of different people, and you'll be able to measure sentiment and trustability, and there'll be a whole lot of intelligence tools that you can use in order to gauge your opinion of that corporation and compare them to other corporations as this content becomes more ubiquitous and more available, and in video.
I actually think what OpenExchange is doing is going to be one of the catalysts for this. Because after I sit through all these investor broadcasts, and I'm so used to seeing the analyst, seeing the CEO, seeing the investor, when it gets to the earnings portion or shareholder point, they're going to demand at least the same quality.
I have two thoughts on that. One is, everybody wants to see or hear what the research analyst is thinking. And up until now, really hard to get 8 research analysts on video on that same company video, but now we can do that. So we can have those 8 analysts all queued up around the world. So that could speed that up. The other thing that I think is going to happen that people haven't imagined yet is that where's this all going to go? It's not all going to go back to the company's website. I believe there's going to be 2 or 3 major destinations for this content. Much like there's a Facebook and a YouTube, I think there's going to be a competitor or CNBC that's going to be a virtual library that's going to have all the companies up there. And once you see your other competitors are going to be on that destination, you're going to have to be on that same destination.
So potentially like an OTT channel, like on a Roku or an Apple TV, sort of
Exactly.
IR TV.
And linking all your video content back to your own LinkedIn page, for example.
Totally.
And then we put Rudy's facial recognition.
And then that's right, and then you really know. But I mean, I've been talking about it for years. I don't understand why there isn't like IR TV. I don't understand why there's. I mean, you could theoretically, when we all started streaming, it was a very limited audience. But today, I have the same power that Netflix has. I could deliver into 85% of the world's homes via Roku, Apple TV, Samsung Smart TVs instantly. Why wouldn't I even go to that one place? And why wouldn't I want to watch it on an 80-inch television as opposed to a 13-inch iPad? Pretty amazing. All right, question.
It's a quick question over here, Sean Silva with ProSec Partners. Thank you for the conversation. I'd be interested in demand and maybe the types of investors that you're seeing embrace this as early adopters, whether that's institutional versus retail, or whether there are specific sectors that have been kind of early adopters or very embracing of this type of mechanism.
Mark?
I guess I would have thought that smaller investors, more regional, would have been the participants, but it really is very global. Norges is one of they only have 9,000 companies in their portfolio. They can't travel to see them all. They're very frequent users. Wellington, Fidelity, Capital. So the big guys, I think because they have so many companies in their portfolio and they're always making decisions on them, they really want to see the companies. True, T. Rowe's always going to get a lot of video because nobody wants to go to Baltimore. Thornburg out in Santa Fe, you're seeing that, but it is pretty global. And definitely Australia's getting a lot.
But why does no one want to go to Baltimore?
Well, I think people like to go to Baltimore, but there's only one big client versus going to Boston, and there's 22. So,
Any?
I mean, in terms of retail versus institutional investors, I think there's a mix they have different motives for attending, particularly on the annual shareholder meeting side. Virtually, there's different motives. I mean, on the retail side, there's accessibility. A retail shareholder isn't going to travel across the country to look at the chairman in the eye. That can be done with video. I think on the institutional side, they just need to see what's going on for their clients. And again, you can now attend, on the shareholder meeting side, you could now attend 3 shareholder meetings in one day, whereas before you had to go to New York or London or whatever to attend. And if we start looking at video from a questioner as well as at the host location, that's probably somewhere where an institutional investor might really be interested to make their point via video.
Simon?
Well, I think it's a retail audience that drives the sentiment and of your company position, right? So it may not affect big investment as it would with institutional, but it's still very important for your company to be perceived well, and therefore making that content accessible to everybody at the same time and not excluding the retail audience, and ensuring that the sentiment of your company is in good keeping is important, right? So it's important for different reasons.
Hey, Keith, can we bring the microphone back to him for 1 second? Because I just want to ask. You don't mind if I ask you a question, right, Tynan? Like, where did you think it was going to be? Like, if you were, like, when you asked a question, did you think it would be higher on one side than the other? And do you agree it's going that way?
Sure. Yeah, I think certainly it makes sense that the retail investor is a bit more abrasive, as they might struggle with access to information more so than the institutional side. So full agreement there. I think you've usually seen the tech sector embrace these channels a bit more quickly compared to either the financial sector or a few others. So certainly on board with the responses, and that's generally where I was headed going in with the question.
Well, thank you very much. All right, we have one more question.
It's really been about alpha, like which groups are moving is where we can see this kind of, med tech right now is very hot, biotech's gotten hot, and then tech will later, but it can kind of be hot and cold.
Just a quick one. It would seem to me the driving sales factor would be, I mean, I'll turn the question around. 5 years ago, if we were sitting here, I would have been skeptical that people would still be dialing into earnings conference calls because I thought this would have evolved already. So obviously the challenge is getting people in corporations to change behavior, right? That's the hardest thing of selling technology. What is the single driving sales message that will get, and again, this is dependent upon the culture of any organization, but what is the single message that's going to get people to say, I need to do this, versus it's a nice to have?
Bryan, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the demand for stakeholder engagement, and that demand's coming from the investors and from the issuers. And an earnings call, what we're talking about here is just, to me, seems the obvious way in which to engage with your ownership.
Mark?
I mean, it's really all about crossing the chasm. And you've got the early adopters and getting them to at least try it once so they get comfortable with it. Everybody else kind of fights it until the critical mass is at a certain level where they look like idiots for not trying it. And I'm seeing that now. Our core customers were Citi, UBS, Credit Suisse, but now Goldman's come on and others have come on. So they've seen that it's actually working. They're getting behind the curve, and they don't like to be behind the curve.
I think, to that point, in terms of embracing technology, I think, the world in which I'm in terms of the shareholder meetings and so on, there's definitely, you want to see your peers doing it before you're doing it. So, the virtual annual meeting is just snowballed because all of a sudden, well, they're doing it, we must do it. We've had experience of that over the years with other technologies we've had, is that, one bank does it, all the other banks are going to do it. One oil company does it, all the other oil company are going to do it. And you'll just be left behind if you don't embrace it.
I think the whole industry in everything has always been at lemons, right?
Yeah.
Once one jumps off the cliff, they're all going to jump off a cliff. I mean, we're at a time I want to thank you guys. But before we do, I want to ask the audience, who has the funkiest socks? I've never that I think you win. Simon, yours are pretty...
Mine's pretty out there, but yours are pretty good
no,
too.
but yours kind of look like after I fell on the witch and like the legs sticking out on Wizard of Oz. Very Wizard of Oz. Not that you're not a witch, but you're just saying.
They're my camera socks.
They're your camera socks? Actually, it's the same thing. Actually, I was given these socks when I sat on a panel on the same stage like a year ago. So thought it gave me good luck then, so I'll wear them again. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the panel. Now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole. You're going to see how a real moderator moderates as she takes my spot. And it's one of the topics that I really want to be in the audience and watch. It's on influencers and influencer marketing. If you're not using our influencer database or any influencer database, shame on anyone out there, because it is the best way to get your story out there. And for you guys, thank you so much.